The rain came crashing down, wild and relentless, as if the sky itself had opened its floodgates in a fury. The steady drumbeat of water against the cracked asphalt echoed through the empty street, merging with the occasional rumble of thunder, vibrating the air with its power. Noah Evans sat behind the wheel of his old red pickup, the windshield wipers fighting to keep up with the downpour. He glanced at the dashboard clock. 8:50 a.m. 10 minutes. 10 minutes before the most important moment of his life. His chest tightened, his heart thundering with the weight of what was at stake. That interview at Dalton Tech, it was everything. The culmination of months of preparation, sacrifice, sleepless nights spent dreaming of a stable future for his 8-year-old son, Ben. But now, with every second that ticked by, that chance was slipping further away. A life-changing opportunity, vanishing like the rainwater draining into the gutters. The storm outside seemed to reflect the turmoil inside him. How could he just leave? How could he race to his interview when just a few steps away, someone was struggling? Noah looked at the empty road ahead, hesitating. He could go now, make the interview, and maybe, just maybe, his life would change. But a part of him knew that no matter how desperate he was, he couldn't just leave someone stranded in the storm. He wasn't that kind of man. Not anymore.
His grip on the steering wheel tightened as his gaze shifted to the other side of the road. Across the waterlogged stretch, through the sheets of rain, a sleek black sedan was tilted awkwardly, one of its wheels deep in the thick mud. A young woman emerged from the car, her high heels sinking into the slush, panic written all over her face. Her gray coat clung to her drenched frame, her hair plastered to her face as she tugged helplessly at her trapped foot, her movements desperate and futile. Noah's heart twisted. She was struggling, helpless. He could see it in her eyes, even from this distance. But the ticking clock on his dashboard reminded him of the risk. His chance at Dalton Tech was fleeting. Time was running out. And yet, the woman's frantic movements were enough to break his resolve. With a sigh, he slammed the truck door, stepping out into the storm, already drenched within seconds. The cold, biting rain stung his skin as he jogged toward her, each step a weight, each moment feeling like a lifetime. He didn't know it yet, but the decision he was making in that instant, the one to help a stranger in need, would change his life forever.
Welcome back to Tales Veritas. In today's video, I will take you through the story of Noah Evans, a man whose life was forever altered by a single act of kindness. First, we'll walk through Noah's decision to help a stranger in the midst of a violent storm, even though it meant missing his life-changing job interview. As the story unfolds, you'll see how this choice leads him to cross paths with Claire Dalton, the billionaire CEO of Dalton Tech, who will challenge everything he thought he knew about opportunity and destiny. From there, we'll follow Noah as he proves his worth, despite the doubt and skepticism from others, and watch him navigate the corporate world and the tensions with a rival at Dalton Tech. But it doesn't end there. Noah will rise, not just in his career, but also in his personal life, as he begins to rebuild his relationship with his son, Ben, and finally sees the fruits of his sacrifice and determination. This is a journey of resilience, integrity, and second chances, a story you won't want to miss. So, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Tales Veritas for more gripping real-life stories. And if you're not ready to subscribe yet, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell us why in the comments section below. Now, let's dive into Noah's remarkable story.
The storm came out of nowhere. One minute the sky was a deep shade of gray, a soft drizzle soaking the streets, the kind of rain that whispered its presence and made you think of nothing more than a passing shower. But the next minute, everything changed.
The heavens opened, unleashing a furious torrent of rain that pounded against the earth like a drum, relentless, unforgiving. The air was thick with the smell of wet asphalt and the sharp bite of ozone. Lightning split the sky, a jagged slash of white that illuminated the world for a brief, blinding moment. Thunder rumbled like the growl of some distant beast, its voice shaking the very ground beneath Noah's feet. Noah Evans sat in the driver's seat of his old red pickup truck, his fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His eyes flicked to the clock on the dashboard, 8:50 a.m. 10 minutes. That's all he had left before the interview at Dalton Tech, the one opportunity he'd been waiting for, the one shot at a stable life for him and his son, the one chance to change the trajectory of their lives. But the rain didn't care. The storm didn't care about his dreams, his hopes, or his plans. It came down with a force that threatened to drown everything in its path. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up, swiping frantically but never fully clearing the view, as though nature itself was conspiring to keep him from his destination. Noah's thoughts were a jumble of pressure and regret. He glanced at the clock again, the seconds ticking by relentlessly. The interview at Dalton Tech was everything to him, an escape from the suffocating grip of overdue bills, of rent checks that seemed to grow larger every month, of his son Ben, who looked up to him with those wide, trusting eyes. Ben didn't understand how hard it was to make ends meet, to put food on the table and keep the lights on. But Noah saw the worry in his son's eyes, and it ate away at him every day.
His grip on the steering wheel tightened as his mind raced. He'd prepared for this interview for months. He'd sacrificed sleep, time with Ben, and everything he had just to get this far. But now, here he was, caught in a storm, with the chance of a lifetime slipping through his fingers. Every second that passed felt like a missed opportunity, a door closing just as he was about to walk through it. Noah exhaled sharply, trying to clear the swirling thoughts in his head. He knew he should drive to Dalton Tech. He knew he should get there, now, before the clock ran out completely. But there was something else pulling at him, something that refused to let him go. It was the sound of someone struggling. Noah's eyes flicked to the side of the road, and that's when he saw her. A sleek black sedan sitting askew on the muddy shoulder of the road. One wheel was buried deep in the thick sludge, the rest of the car tilted awkwardly, half submerged in water. The door to the sedan flung open, and a woman, barely visible through the curtain of rain, stumbled out, her high heels sinking into the soft ground, her coat billowing behind her as she struggled to free herself from the mud. Her hair, wet and matted to her face, clung to her like a dark veil, her mascara running down her cheeks in streaks, leaving trails of frustration and helplessness. Noah's heart clenched in his chest. For a moment, everything around him seemed to fade. The storm, the interview, the pressure, it all seemed to blur, replaced by the sight of a stranger in distress, caught in a moment of vulnerability. She needs help. The thought hit him like a punch to the gut. Noah glanced at the clock again, 8:51 a.m. Another minute lost. But he couldn't drive away. Not like this. Not when someone needed him.
He could hear his father's voice echoing in his head, the old man's words about honor and duty, lessons ingrained into him as a Marine. You don't walk away from someone who needs help. Those words had stuck with him long after his military service had ended, and now, as he stared at the woman, sinking deeper into the mud, Noah knew what he had to do. Damn it. Noah slammed the door of the truck open, the rain hitting him like icy needles as he stepped into the storm. His boots sank into the wet ground as he jogged toward her, every step heavy, each moment dragging him further away from his only chance at a better life. But there was no turning back. Not now. The moment he locked eyes with the woman, he knew he had made his decision. She turned, startled, her eyes flashing with a mix of fear and annoyance as she tried to yank her foot free from the mud. "I don't need help," she snapped, her voice shaking with frustration, though she couldn't quite hide the tremble of panic beneath the surface. Noah didn't flinch. His tone was steady, calm, like a rock against the chaos around them. "You'll sprain your ankle if you keep pulling like that." She hesitated, eyeing him suspiciously as he crouched down to help her. The wind howled around them, but Noah's focus remained on her foot, wedged in the mud. He gripped her heel firmly, pulling it free with a grunt, and she stumbled back, almost falling into his arms. Before she could protest, he was already heading toward his truck, the chain in hand. Without waiting for thanks or acknowledgement, he worked quickly, tying it to the sedan's front bumper. "Get inside," he called over the roar of the storm. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking between him and her car, but then she obeyed, sliding into the passenger seat of the truck, a look of reluctant gratitude flashing in her eyes.
Noah didn't waste a second. He jumped back into the truck, the engine roaring to life, its tires spinning on the slick road as he fought to pull her car free. The chain snapped taut, and with a final burst of power, the sedan broke free of the mud and slid back onto solid ground. He unhooked the chain, barely glancing at the woman before turning to leave. "Wait," she called out, her voice now softer. "At least take this," she said, extending a large bill through the window. The expression on her face was a strange mixture of gratitude and something else, something he couldn't quite place. Noah shook his head, his gaze never meeting hers. "No need. I'm already late for my interview." The woman's eyebrows furrowed. "Interview?" "Dalton Tech," Noah replied, his voice steady despite the rush of disappointment in his chest. He climbed back into the truck, his heart sinking further as the minutes passed. The rain battered the windshield, the clock ticking louder in his mind. Too late. He had missed it. That one chance. And yet, as he pulled away, something inside him felt right. The decision had been made. He had done what was needed. The woman in the rearview mirror, the sleek black sedan now parked safely on solid ground, remained in the storm's wake. But Noah knew this was just the beginning. The storm wasn't over yet. The storm wasn't just a downpour. It was a maelstrom, a relentless wave of nature's fury. The air was thick with rain, each drop falling as though it carried the weight of Noah's every regret. Every gust of wind seemed to push harder, like the universe itself was testing his resolve. But Noah wasn't paying attention to the wind or the rain. His thoughts were consumed by one thing, and one thing only: the interview. Dalton Tech. The name echoed in his mind like a bell tolling, each chime louder than the last. It was more than just a job. It was his lifeline. It was the key to financial stability, a chance to finally escape the crushing weight of overdue bills and shattered dreams. A fresh start. It was a ticket to the future he wanted for Ben, the son he loved more than life itself.
The kind of future where his boy wouldn't have to wonder if they'd have enough food to eat or if the lights would stay on. The truck rumbled over the slick roads, his mind a whirlwind of desperation and doubt. 10 minutes. He had 10 minutes to get to Dalton Tech's headquarters in San Francisco, California. The prestigious tech company had been his dream for years, but now, as the rain poured down in relentless sheets, it felt like that dream was slipping through his fingers, just like the water running down the windshield. Noah's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. He glanced at the clock. 8:51 a.m. That's when he'd arrived. He was late. And no matter how hard he tried, the interview was as good as gone. He'd worked for this, sacrificed for it, and now it was just out of reach. The thought of walking away felt like failure, yet something deep within him, something fundamental, pushed him to stop. His eyes drifted back to the woman in distress, her figure still a blur through the pouring rain. She needs help. Noah's gut twisted. He felt the pull, that invisible string tugging at him, stronger than the fear of missing his future, stronger than the cold reality of what lay ahead. It wasn't just about getting ahead anymore. It was about doing what was right. Doing the right thing, even when the cost seemed too high. He could still hear his father's voice in his head. A man doesn't walk away when someone needs help. Never. His pulse quickened as the truck slowed. He was already late. But this was different. It wasn't the corporate world that called to him now. It was his own humanity, something he thought had been buried under years of struggle. The truck rolled to a halt, tires splashing in the thick rainwater. And in that moment, as Noah looked at the woman struggling to free herself, something inside him shifted.
Without thinking, he slammed the truck door open, the icy rain hitting his face like 1,000 sharp needles. The world around him was a blur of water and sound, the storm amplifying his every step. He was drenched in seconds, but he didn't care. His mind was on the woman, on her vulnerable state in this cruel weather, her frustration and helplessness clear in the way she tugged at her trapped foot. She saw him approaching, and her first instinct was to pull back, her face a mask of disbelief and irritation. "I don't need help," she snapped, her voice shaky with both pride and panic. Her hands gripped her heel, still stuck in the mud, and she pulled harder, sinking even deeper. Her eyes darted toward him, searching for a reason to dismiss him, to send him away, but Noah didn't back down. He had seen enough of the world to know that when people were vulnerable, they didn't always ask for help, they resisted it. But his resolve wasn't one to be broken. "You'll sprain your ankle if you keep pulling like that," he said, his voice calm, almost gentle, despite the raging storm around them. She hesitated, glaring at him, but the tension in her body eased just a fraction. Her lips parted, and then she nodded, just once, in defeat. He could see it now, the weariness in her eyes, the exhaustion of trying to solve a problem that wouldn't bend to her will. She had given up the fight, even if only for a moment, and that moment was all Noah needed. Noah crouched down in the mud beside her, the rain soaking through his clothes as he placed his hands gently on her heel. She didn't flinch, didn't protest. She was silent, her eyes narrowing in confusion or maybe curiosity. As he worked to free her foot, he thought about Ben, waiting at home, unaware of the sacrifice Noah was making. The clock ticked away in his head. He had already lost the interview, and yet here he was, helping a stranger in need. There was no going back. But deep down, Noah knew it didn't matter. This was the right thing to do. With one firm tug, her foot popped free, and she stumbled back, almost falling into his arms. Noah's chest tightened as he steadied her, his hands on her shoulders. She looked up at him, her expression shifting from frustration to something more vulnerable. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words never came. Instead, she just stood there, blinking in the heavy rain. Noah straightened, ignoring the cold that seeped into his bones. He jogged back to his truck, pulling an old tow chain from the bed. He didn't need her to say thank you, didn't need anything. He just needed to help. The seconds felt like minutes as he worked quickly, attaching the chain to the front bumper of her car. The wind howled in his face, his wet hair sticking to his forehead, but Noah didn't waver. He knew what had to be done. Once the car was hooked up, he motioned for her to get in. She looked at him, eyes still wide, almost as if she couldn't comprehend his quiet determination. "Get inside," Noah called over the sound of the storm, his voice firm but calm. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then obeyed.
As she climbed into the truck, he could hear the quiet sigh of relief escape her lips. And though he couldn't quite place it, there was something about the way she looked at him that felt like an unspoken gratitude, a fleeting moment of connection between two strangers in a world that often felt disconnected. Noah climbed back into the driver's seat, and the truck roared to life. The wheels spun for a moment on the slick ground before they found traction, and with a loud grind of metal and rubber, the sedan lurched forward out of the mud. The car was free. He didn't wait for a thank you. He didn't need one. He unhooked the chain without a word, glancing at her once more, before turning back to the road, the storm still pouring down around them. Her voice stopped him. "Wait," she called, her voice softer now. "Take this." She held out a large bill, her hand shaking just slightly. Noah shook his head, refusing to meet her gaze. "No need. I'm already late for my interview," he said, the words tasting bitter as they left his mouth. She blinked, surprised. "Interview?" she asked, her tone softer, almost intrigued. "Dalton Tech," Noah replied, his voice flat. "But not anymore." He didn't look at her again as he climbed back into the truck, the weight of what he had just given up settling deep in his chest. The interview was gone. That job, his shot at a future, was gone. But there was a strange peace in the choice he had made. It wasn't about the job anymore. It was about doing what was right. And Noah knew, in that moment, that sometimes doing the right thing meant risking everything. Noah's truck rolled to a halt in front of the towering glass and steel structure of Dalton Tech, a beacon of success in the heart of Silicon Valley, California. The building was sleek, modern, and intimidating, its clean lines and sharp angles reflecting the daylight in a way that made it seem almost untouchable. His heart hammered in his chest as he parked in the visitor's lot, his thoughts a chaotic mess of hope and dread. The rain had started to ease, but the storm in his mind was far from over. For a moment, Noah sat still in the truck, the engine running as he stared at the large, imposing entrance. This was it, the moment he had been working toward for months. Dalton Tech, the company that represented everything he wanted for his future, for Ben, his son. Financial stability, a new beginning, and a career that could set them up for life. His fingers drummed on the steering wheel in nervous anticipation. He had done everything he could to prepare for this interview. Countless hours spent researching the company, brushing up on his skills, and tailoring his resume to stand out in a sea of applicants. He had already felt the sting of rejection too many times, but this time he knew it would be different. This time, everything would change. Or so he thought. Noah exhaled sharply, pushing the door open and stepping into the cool, crisp air. The sharp scent of rain lingered as he made his way toward the entrance, a sense of unease creeping over him. He pulled his coat tighter around himself, trying to shake the chill that wasn't just from the weather, but from the gnawing feeling in his gut. His steps echoed in the vast, almost sterile lobby of Dalton Tech. White walls, glass panels, sleek chrome furniture. Everything about the space screamed luxury, success, and a life so far removed from his own. The receptionist looked up from her desk, her face polite, professional, but impersonal. Noah walked up, trying to steady his nerves, forcing a smile. "I'm here for the 9 a.m. interview with Mr. Harrison," he said, his voice steady, despite the storm raging inside him. The receptionist typed something on her computer, her fingers clicking rapidly as the seconds ticked by. Then she paused, her brow furrowing slightly. "I'm sorry, sir, but it seems your interview has been canceled." Noah's chest tightened. "Canceled?" His voice was sharp, disbelief creeping in as he tried to make sense of what was happening. He had received the confirmation email just the day before, his excitement nearly bubbling over when he read it. Dalton Tech wanted him. This was his chance.
So why?
"Yes, sir," she said, her tone apologetic, but matter of fact. "There was an issue on Mr. Harrison's end, and he had to reschedule. Unfortunately, there are no available slots today." She slid a paper across the counter. "We can reschedule your interview for a later date, but we'd need to have you fill out the paperwork again and, well, it's best to reapply when you're available." The words felt like a punch to his gut. Noah stared at the paper, his mind reeling. Reschedule. The interview was over before it even began. He had sacrificed so much to get here. Countless hours away from Ben, the endless nights spent studying, doing everything he could to ensure this opportunity was his. And now? Now it was slipping through his fingers like sand in the wind. His pulse quickened as the realization sank in. He had failed. He had poured everything into getting this one chance, and it was gone in the blink of an eye. The world around him seemed to blur, the sharp edges of the polished lobby fading into nothingness. The only thing he could see was the disheartening truth. This was just another failure, another door slammed in his face. Noah turned, his legs heavy, as he walked back toward the exit. He could feel the weight of the missed opportunity pressing down on him, each step a reminder of how easily everything he had worked for could disappear. His heart ached with the realization that his future, Ben's future, was uncertain once again. The air outside felt colder now. As he walked back to his truck, the world around him seemed to mock his failure. The rain picking up once more, the clouds darkening as though reflecting his mood. He climbed into the truck, slamming the door shut with more force than necessary. The engine roared to life, but Noah barely registered it. The silence in the truck was deafening, and all he could think about was how everything he had hoped for was now just a shattered dream. His fingers gripped the steering wheel, the storm inside him intensifying. He had let Ben down. He had promised his son a better life, one where they didn't have to worry about rent and bills. But now he was back at square one. And the worst part? He didn't know how to face Ben after this. How could he explain to his son that the future he had promised was still out of reach? The weight of disappointment and failure settled heavily on his chest as he drove away from Dalton Tech. His dreams of a better life, of securing a future where Ben could have everything he deserved, seemed farther away than ever. The future had just slipped farther out of reach, and Noah was left wondering where he had gone wrong.
The cold reality of it all hit him hard, but what hurt the most was knowing that this missed opportunity wasn't just a personal failure, it was a failure that would affect Ben's future too, and Noah had no idea how to fix it. As Noah's truck disappeared down the slick streets of Silicon Valley, Claire Dalton remained in her luxurious office on the top floor of Dalton Tech, gazing out at the rain-drenched cityscape. The storm outside had begun to calm, the furious downpour now just a steady drizzle. Yet, inside her glass-walled office, Claire couldn't shake the feeling of curiosity that gripped her. Her eyes remained fixed on the wet world outside, though her mind wasn't on the storm. It was on the man she had just watched, the stranger who had made an unforgettable impression on her. The selfless act of kindness he had shown toward a woman in need, without expecting anything in return, had left a mark on her. In a world driven by power, wealth, and billion-dollar deals, where every move was calculated for maximum gain, Noah Evans had chosen to help a stranger in the middle of a storm, risking his own future in the process. Claire's mind raced as she replayed the scene. Why had he done it? In a city like Silicon Valley, where the powerful made decisions with ruthless precision, Noah had chosen humanity over ambition. A man willing to sacrifice a career-changing opportunity for a stranger? That was something rare, something Claire hadn't encountered in years. The more she thought about it, the more intrigued she became. She was the CEO of a tech empire. She had built Dalton Tech into a multi-billion-dollar company, but the actions of a single father had somehow managed to stand out in a way that even her most profitable ventures never had. As Claire sat back in her sleek chair, she couldn't help but wonder about Noah. Who was he?
Why had he given up so much for someone he didn't know? The storm outside may have passed, but the storm inside her, that feeling of curiosity and intrigue, was just beginning to brew. She had dealt with countless CEOs, investors, and high-powered executives throughout her career, each one vying for attention, each one playing their part in the high-stakes world of Silicon Valley. But Noah Evans was different. There was something about his quiet dignity, his refusal to accept anything in return, that resonated with her in a way she hadn't expected. It was a rare thing to witness in this world of startups, venture capital, and cutthroat competition.
Without thinking, Claire stood up from her desk, her fingers tracing the smooth surface of her polished wood. Her gaze shifted from the rain-soaked city to her computer screen. She needed to know more about Noah Evans. The intrigue was too strong to ignore. This wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It was something deeper, something personal. "Mia," she called, her voice steady as ever, "I want a full background check on Noah Evans. His history, his work, his connections, everything. I want to know who he is." Mia, her efficient assistant, nodded and immediately began her search. But Claire's mind was already elsewhere. She was thinking about the choices that had led Noah to this moment. Why had he chosen to help a woman in need when he had everything to lose? What was it about him that was different from the others in the valley? The billionaires, the tech moguls, who never seemed to make decisions without some agenda. Claire crossed the room and stood by the window, the rain now just a soft whisper against the glass. Her thoughts were scattered, but one thing was clear. Noah Evans wasn't just any man. There was something about him, something she couldn't let go of. And that was why, as the storm faded and the sun began to break through the clouds, Claire Dalton made a decision. She would find him. She would uncover the truth about this man, this stranger who had made such an impact in such a short amount of time. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that this wasn't just about him helping someone. Noah Evans had something unique, and Claire Dalton intended to find out what it was. The rain had finally slowed, but the gray skies still hung heavily over Silicon Valley. The storm's fury had passed, leaving behind the soaked streets and the sharp scent of wet pavement. Claire Dalton, perched in her sleek office at Dalton Tech, watched through her glass window as the last few drops of rain trickled from the eaves, pooling at the edges of the sidewalk. Despite the storm's end, her thoughts were still swirling, consumed by the image of Noah Evans, a man she had never met before, but whose actions had now been etched into her mind.
Claire had spent the last few hours thinking about him, replaying the moment over and over. She had seen Noah's selflessness in a way few people could. The decision he had made, to help a stranger at the risk of his own future, struck her deeply. In a world where power, wealth, and personal gain often trumped integrity, Noah had made the choice that no one would have expected. She could have walked away from the encounter, brushed it off as a moment of human decency, but it lingered with her. It felt like a catalyst, something that didn't just change Noah's path, but hers as well. After a few brief calls to her assistant, Claire had gathered enough information to find out where Noah lived. She had no concrete reason for this decision, just an overwhelming need to understand him. It was something different from the usual calculated steps she took in corporate strategy. This was personal. And when you were someone like Claire Dalton, a billionaire CEO who ran a multi-billion-dollar empire, you didn't often let things go that easily. Her driver pulled into a modest neighborhood, a far cry from the world of high-tech campuses and luxury estates that surrounded her daily life. Claire stepped out of the car, her tailored jacket shielding her from the cool breeze, but she couldn't help but feel a rush of anticipation. Noah Evans wasn't someone she had planned to meet under these circumstances. She had her team of executives, consultants, and financial analysts who typically made decisions for her. But Noah was different. She approached the small house, her heels clicking softly on the pavement. The door opened just as she reached it.
Noah stood there, his face startled, his expression a mixture of disbelief and confusion. You, what are you doing here?
Claire smiled softly, her eyes holding an intensity that belied the calm of her voice. I thought I'd come and say thank you for what you did earlier. Noah's brow furrowed. He looked at her, then back at the street, as if wondering if this was some sort of mistake. I don't understand. How do you know what happened? How did you even find me? Claire took a step forward, keeping her distance, not wanting to overwhelm him. I know a lot of things, she said simply. I'm Claire Dalton, CEO of Dalton Tech. Her words hung in the air for a moment. Noah's eyes widened with recognition, but there was also confusion. It was clear he hadn't made the connection between the stranger he had helped and the woman standing in front of him. You're the CEO? He stammered. But, I didn't. Claire raised her hand, cutting him off gently. You didn't know who I was. And frankly, I wasn't interested in telling you. What I'm interested in is why you did what you did today. Why did you risk your job interview, your future, to help someone you didn't know? Noah's face hardened slightly, as if bracing himself for the weight of the question. His eyes flickered toward the sidewalk and then back to her. The storm had passed, but the tension between them remained, palpable in the cool air. He crossed his arms, his stance firm, but there was a weariness in his gaze, a weariness that reflected his life, full of sacrifices and choices made with the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. I didn't do it for recognition, Noah replied, his voice steady, though his words carried an undercurrent of something deeper. I didn't do it for you, or for anyone really. He shifted his feet, looking down briefly, before meeting his eyes. I did it because it was the right thing to do, and I've learned that no matter how tough things get, you don't walk away when someone needs help.
Claire listened, absorbing his words. There was an undeniable honesty in his tone. It wasn't the corporate rhetoric she was used to, the calculated charm of billionaires who spoke only in terms of profit margins and bottom lines. It was real, raw, and something she hadn't heard in years. In the world of tech startups, venture capital, and high-stakes business, that kind of authenticity was rare, almost non-existent. So, no hidden agenda? Claire pressed gently, her curiosity piqued. No thought that it might come back around to you? That helping a stranger might somehow benefit you in the future? Noah looked at her, unflinching. No. He shook his head. It wasn't about what I could gain. I was late for my interview with Dalton Tech. I had everything to lose. He took a deep breath, his voice lowering slightly, as if to add weight to his words. But sometimes, the right thing to do doesn't come with a reward. It just comes with a sense of doing what's necessary, regardless of the cost. Claire stood there, processing his words. Noah Evans wasn't a man of high-flying rhetoric, chasing deals and throwing around his influence. He was a man who valued doing the right thing, no matter the consequences. That kind of person didn't come around often, especially in the high-stakes world of billionaires and tech moguls. In that moment, Claire realized she wasn't just standing in front of a man. She was standing in front of someone who embodied the very values she had once sought, long before the corporate world had stripped them away. You know, Claire said, her voice softening, I've spent my whole life building an empire, learning that every move you make should come with a calculated benefit. And yet here you are, someone willing to risk it all for something as simple as helping someone else. That's rare. Noah shrugged slightly, an uneasy smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Maybe that's why it didn't seem like a big deal.
Claire studied him for a moment longer, her thoughts swirling. She wasn't sure what had driven her to find him. Maybe it was fascination. Maybe it was curiosity. Or perhaps it was something deeper, a belief that In a world filled with self-serving billionaires and corporate titans, someone like Noah Evans was exactly what Dalton Tech needed. "I'll tell you what," Claire said, breaking the silence. "You might not have gotten the interview you were hoping for today, but I'm willing to give you a shot. You've got something that money can't buy, and Dalton Tech could use someone like you." Noah blinked, stunned by her words. The interview that had slipped away was suddenly back in his hands, though not in the way he'd ever imagined. Claire smiled, the storm outside now nothing more than a whisper. The real storm, it seemed, had only just begun. Claire Dalton leaned back in her sleek leather chair, her fingers tapping thoughtfully against the polished wood of her desk. The office was quiet now, the storm outside reduced to nothing more than a faint rumble in the distance. She had made her decision, but the tension between them still hung in the air. Noah Evans had, in many ways, surprised her. His selflessness, his honesty, the way he had chosen to help a stranger over his own future, these were qualities that were rare in her world of Silicon Valley tech giants, where ambition and self-interest often dominated. She studied him now, seated across from her, the slight unease still visible in his posture. His broad shoulders were hunched slightly, his gaze shifting between the floor and her eyes, unsure of what to make of the opportunity she was about to offer him. Claire's hand moved to the stack of papers on her desk, shuffling them as if she was about to make another deal. But this wasn't business as usual. This wasn't about securing the next billion-dollar investment or finalizing a merger with a competitor. This was different. This was personal.
"Let's cut to the point," Claire said, her voice steady yet inviting. "Dalton Tech is facing a crisis." She paused, watching his reaction carefully. "A major logistics failure. Our systems are down, and we're losing millions. We need someone who can think outside the box, someone who can handle pressure and deliver fast, effective solutions. And frankly," she leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his, "I think you're that someone." Noah blinked, his expression a mixture of disbelief and wariness. His mind raced. This wasn't what he had expected. He had no idea what had prompted this offer. He was just a man who had helped a stranger. But here was the CEO of Dalton Tech, one of the most powerful tech moguls in the world, offering him a chance to step into a crisis far bigger than he could have imagined. The magnitude of the situation settled over him like a weight, but there was something else there too, a spark of possibility. "You're offering me a job?" Noah asked, his voice uncertain, though tinged with the smallest glimmer of hope. He stopped himself, shaking his head. "I don't understand. I'm just a guy who helped someone out in a storm. I don't have any qualifications for a role like this." Claire smiled, leaning back in her chair, her fingers steepled in front of her as she observed him, noting the self-doubt in his voice. She knew that self-doubt well. It was something she had battled many times on her climb to the top of the tech world. But Noah? He hadn't seen himself yet. He hadn't realized what he was capable of. "Noah," she said, her tone gentle but firm, "you may not have a traditional background, but you have something far more important. You have integrity, resourcefulness, and the ability to think on your feet. These are qualities that can't be learned in a classroom or from a corporate manual. And in this world, where the billionaire tech moguls make their moves based on calculations, profits, and data, you're rare. You're someone who does the right thing because it's the right thing to do."
Noah's gaze faltered as he processed her words. There was a certain weight to them, a sincerity that made him pause. He had spent most of his life feeling like an outsider, an underdog, someone who had to fight for every step forward. Now, here was this billionaire CEO offering him a shot at something bigger than he ever thought possible. "But the stakes are high," Claire continued, her voice growing more serious. "If you take this position, it won't be easy. We're on the brink of losing major clients, and if our logistics system isn't fixed in the next 24 hours, the damage will be irreparable. You'll have to work with a team that's skeptical, that's already been burned by failure, and you'll have to prove yourself fast. Noah's mind whirled. The weight of the situation was heavy, and the pressure was suffocating. He had never worked in the tech world, never handled something as complex or as high stakes as this. But there was a part of him that couldn't ignore the call of the challenge and the promise of something more. He had always fought for a better life, for his son, for a future that didn't seem out of reach. This could be his chance. Claire watched him closely, sensing the internal struggle. "You don't have to answer right now," she said, softening her tone. "Take some time to think it over. I'm offering you a chance, Noah, a chance to change your life and to do something meaningful. But I need someone who can handle the grind, the long hours, and the uncertainty that comes with running a tech empire like Dalton Tech." Noah's breath caught in his chest. The fear of failure still lingered at the edges of his thoughts, but something in his gut told him that this was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. A chance to finally make something of himself. A chance to show Ben that hard work, integrity, and doing the right thing could lead to more than just survival.
He exhaled slowly, his gaze meeting Claire's with quiet determination. "I'll do it," he said, the words coming out with more certainty than he had expected. "I'll take the job." Claire's eyes narrowed, studying him for a moment longer, before a smile tugged at her lips. It was a smile of recognition, of approval. She leaned forward, extending her hand across the desk. "Welcome to Dalton Tech, Noah Evans. I think you're going to surprise us all." Noah took her hand, the weight of the moment not lost on him. He had just stepped into a new world, a world of power, of billion-dollar decisions, and of high-stakes risk. And yet, as he shook her hand, he realized that he wasn't just about to take a job, he was about to change his life. The storm outside had passed, but for Noah, a new storm was just beginning. The polished floors of Dalton Tech's headquarters had never felt so cold. The sleek, minimalist design of the office, with its towering glass windows and clean lines, suddenly seemed less like a symbol of tech empire success and more like a fortress teetering on the edge of collapse. The usual hum of activity that filled the space was replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional phone call or urgent conversation. At the heart of the storm, in the middle of the company's expansive logistics floor, the team of analysts and engineers sat hunched over their computers, their eyes wide with panic. The unorganized screens that had displayed real-time data were now filled with error messages and system crashes. The logistics system, the backbone of Dalton Tech's operations, had failed. "We're losing millions," the words came from Mia, the operations manager, her voice filled with panic as she addressed the room. "Our distribution channels are completely down, and the deliveries are piling up. If we don't fix this now, we'll lose major clients. This is catastrophic." Claire Dalton stood at the front of the room, her usual composure slipping for the first time in years. As the CEO of Dalton Tech, she had seen crises come and go, but nothing like this. The company had spent years building its reputation, becoming one of the most powerful players in Silicon Valley's tech sector. But this was a disaster that could undo it all in a matter of hours. "How did this happen?" Claire demanded, her voice sharp and low, cutting through the chaos. She turned toward Jason Mitchell, the head of the technical division. His eyes were glued to the multiple screens in front of him, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he tried to salvage what little he could. "I don't know yet," Jason said, his voice strained. "The system should have handled this load, but something went wrong.
something we didn't anticipate. We're trying to patch it, but at this rate, the damage is already done." Claire's eyes narrowed. Jason's frustration was palpable, but it was clear he didn't have all the answers. She knew that in moments like these, every second counted. Dalton Tech didn't just risk losing clients, it risked its reputation, its dominance in the tech industry, and the trust of its investors. This wasn't just about fixing a broken system. This was about saving everything they had worked for. And then, from the back of the room, came a voice that didn't belong to anyone in the room, but one that would change the direction of the crisis. "I can fix it."
All eyes turned toward Noah Evans, the man Claire had brought in just hours earlier, a complete outsider to Dalton Tech's world. The room was filled with skeptical glances, dismissive looks from the technical team who had already been working tirelessly on the issue, and even from Jason, who shot him a look of disbelief. Noah stood confidently in the doorway, his presence cutting through the tension like a blade. He had no tech background, no experience with the cutting-edge systems that powered Dalton Tech's logistics infrastructure. But there was something about his tone, something about the way he carried himself that commanded attention. Jason Mitchell didn't hide his disdain. "You're not serious," he said, crossing his arms over his chest. "You're telling me some guy who, fixed cars and pulled people out of the mud is going to come in here and fix this?" The other engineers exchanged glances, their skepticism evident. Noah, however, remained unshaken. His eyes met Jason's without flinching, and he stepped into the room, his gait slow but deliberate, as if he knew exactly what needed to be done. "Maybe I don't know how your system works," Noah said, his voice calm and steady, "but I do know how to solve problems. I've dealt with pressure before. I've worked in situations where people's livelihoods were on the line. So yeah, I can fix this. Let me take a look." Jason opened his mouth to protest, but closed it again, his jaw tightening as he realized that Noah wasn't backing down. He gestured toward the nearest terminal, reluctantly offering Noah access. The rest of the team watched closely, their eyes narrowing with doubt, waiting for him to make a mistake. Noah walked toward the terminal, his eyes scanning the screen with ease. He tapped the keyboard with precision, his mind working faster than the rest of the room could follow. His mind was an analytical machine, honed by years of solving logistical issues far outside the realm of technology. But as he dove deeper into the system, he began to see things others hadn't. The patterns, the errors, the point of failure that had brought everything crashing down. His hands moved quickly, his fingers dancing across the keys as he isolated the root cause, an undetected database conflict that had spiraled into a full system failure. He issued commands to restore the system, recalibrating the entire network in a matter of minutes. "Done," Noah said, stepping back from the terminal. He was met with a stunned silence. Jason stared at him, disbelief etched on his face. The screen flickered, then refreshed, the error messages disappearing one by one. The data flowed again, smooth and uninterrupted. The logistics system was back online. Noah turned to the team. "The system's restored. You can start processing the backlogs now. Everything should be back to normal in about an hour." Mia, still stunned, rushed to her computer to verify his work. She looked up, her eyes wide in amazement. "He's right," she whispered. "It's working." The room erupted in muted cheers, but Jason was silent, his expression a mix of frustration and grudging admiration. He didn't want to admit it, but Noah had done what the rest of them couldn't. He had solved the crisis and done so with a calm precision that left everyone else in awe.
Claire, standing off to the side, watched the scene unfold. She had seen Noah's skill firsthand, and while the logistics crisis was far from over, it was clear that Noah had earned his place in this room. As she looked around at the relieved faces of her team, Claire knew that Dalton Tech had just found something it didn't know it needed,
a person who didn't just solve problems, he rose to the occasion when it counted the most. Noah Evans had just proved his worth. The hum of Dalton Tech's logistics floor was deafening, the quiet murmur of keyboards clacking and screens buzzing in the background blending with the tension that filled the room. The team had gathered around the system's terminal, watching in stunned silence as Noah Evans worked at the keyboard, his fingers moving with precision and a calm assurance that contrasted sharply with the chaos around him. Noah wasn't just solving a technical problem. He was proving to everyone in this room that he wasn't just a stranger who had stumbled into a crisis. He was a man with skills, resilience, and the kind of clarity of thought that even seasoned professionals sometimes lacked. His mind worked methodically, breaking down the problem into manageable parts, each one analyzed with the same meticulous focus that he had applied when he was first presented with the crisis. There was no panic in him, no rush, just a steady, unshakable resolve to find the issue and fix it. The logistics system, once a well-oiled machine powering the heart of Dalton Tech's global operations, had been thrown into disarray by a cascading failure of its database. For a company whose billion-dollar contracts depended on efficiency and real-time delivery, this breakdown was not just a glitch, it was a crisis of the highest order. The threat of losing clients, of irreparable damage to their reputation, loomed over them like a storm cloud, making the pressure on Noah even more intense.
But Noah's eyes remained calm, his focus absolute, as he clicked through the system's diagnostics. The terminal screen displayed rows of error messages, flashing warnings that the system had fallen into disarray. But Noah, rather than being intimidated by the overwhelming data, picked through it methodically, isolating key patterns. He leaned closer to the terminal, tapping into his experience and knowledge, even if it wasn't from the tech sector. He could read the system's responses like an expert. He understood how complex systems worked, how logistical networks depended on the smallest of details to function smoothly. He quickly identified the root of the failure, a routing conflict that had caused the servers to crash, and a duplicate entry that had caused the data flow to bottleneck. "This is it," Noah said, his voice calm but certain. "The routing data is conflicting with the new entries we received this morning, and the system didn't account for the duplicate. It's a cascading failure from there." Noah's explanation was simple, but precise. He wasn't simply diagnosing a technical issue. He was showing a deep understanding of the entire logistics process, understanding how the technical systems, real-world logistics, and human error combined to create a perfect storm. And yet Noah's analysis was delivered with the kind of confidence that only someone who had faced true stakes in life could possess. But not everyone in the room was convinced. Jason Mitchell, the head of the technical division, was still skeptical. As the highest-ranking tech officer, Jason had spent years overseeing the systems that powered Dalton Tech. He had his pride, and Noah, an outsider with no formal tech credentials, had just waltzed in and repaired the system in less than an hour. That was unacceptable to Jason. "Are you sure about that?" Jason's voice cut through the tension. His eyes narrowed as he leaned over Noah's shoulder, looking at the terminal's readout. "I've been working with these systems for years. You're telling me the entire system is failing because of a duplicate entry? It's a much bigger issue than that. You're missing something."
Noah didn't flinch. He had faced doubt before, whether in his years working odd jobs to make ends meet, or in the military, where his decisions had consequences. In this moment, with the stakes as high as they were, he wasn't about to be shaken. He turned slightly to face Jason, his expression unwavering. "I'm not missing anything," Noah replied, his voice calm but firm. "The system is responding to a conflict, and that's causing the data bottleneck. I'm not a tech expert, but I do know how systems fail under pressure. And right now, this is the problem." Jason scoffed, his gaze sharp. "It's cute that you think you know what's going on, but I've been running these systems for over a decade. Trust me, There's no way it's this simple." Noah remained composed, but there was a steeliness in his eyes now. He wasn't about to let Jason's arrogance undermine the work he had done. "If you want to keep searching for the needle in the haystack, be my guest. But the problem is here. I've already fixed it. It's your choice whether or not you want to test it." The air in the room was thick with tension. Jason's pride, and perhaps his ego, clashed with Noah's humble confidence. But Noah was no stranger to doubt. He had fought battles in his life that mattered far more than this, and he had learned to trust his instincts. As Jason opened his mouth to argue, Claire Dalton, who had been standing silently by the door, watching everything unfold, took a step forward. Her eyes were locked on Noah, and she said nothing, but her presence in the room was enough. Jason faltered, his expression softening, realizing that Claire was watching closely.
Jason paused, his defiance momentarily stilled by her presence. The tension between the two men hung in the air, but it was Claire's silent support of Noah that carried the most weight. She had been watching him work, analyzing his every move. In that moment, she saw everything she needed to see. Noah wasn't just an outsider, he was the man who had cracked the code to saving Dalton Tech. "I trust him," Claire said quietly, her voice cutting through the room with an unmistakable authority. "The system's back online, and Noah has done what none of you could. Let's move forward." The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, everything was still. Jason, who had been so certain of his own expertise, took a step back, allowing the weight of Claire's support to settle over the room. Noah turned back to the terminal, his focus unwavering, as the rest of the team began to return to their stations. He had proven himself, not just to the team, but to himself. The room, once full of doubt and skepticism, was now buzzing with a new sense of hope. Dalton Tech's logistics were back on track, and Noah had been the one to make it happen. The future was uncertain, but Noah had made a choice. And in that moment, it was the right choice. The quiet hum of Dalton Tech's logistics floor was deafening. The usual chatter and clatter had been replaced with an anxious energy as everyone stared at the monitors, waiting for something, anything, to show signs of life. The system failure had gone from a minor inconvenience to an impending disaster. Noah Evans stood at the heart of the room, his fingers dancing over the keyboard, his focus razor-sharp. The pressure of the moment seemed to fuel him rather than deter him. Noah wasn't just fixing a system, he was saving Dalton Tech. The company's reputation, its global network, and its billion-dollar contracts were all on the line. In the midst of the chaos, Noah found a sense of calm knowing that he had been in high-pressure situations before. This wasn't his first challenge, and it wouldn't be his last.
Jason Mitchell, the head of the technical division, stood at the back of the room, arms crossed tightly over his chest. His sharp eyes never left Noah's every move, his skepticism clear. Jason's doubt was evident. He couldn't fathom that an outsider, someone with no formal tech credentials, could step in and solve the problem that had eluded the team for hours. But Noah wasn't fazed. He'd spent years working in situations that required both technical skill and resilience, and this was no different. The terminal screens flashed with a cascade of error messages, but Noah remained unshaken. His hands moved with precision, eyes scanning the data, looking for the point of failure. It was there, hidden in plain sight, a routing conflict in the data processing, a duplicate entry that had spiraled into a system crash. Noah's mind connected the dots. He quickly isolated the issue, rerouted the logistical data, and ran a series of diagnostic tests to ensure that the fix was solid. Jason stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "That's it? A duplicate entry? Are you telling me that's the only problem?" Noah didn't flinch. He simply nodded, his confidence unwavering. Yes, a single duplicate entry that caused a cascade failure. But it's more than that. The system couldn't compensate for it. That's why it crashed. Jason shook his head, disbelief written all over his face. I've been running these systems for over a decade. This is more than just one glitch. Noah turned, locking eyes with Jason. If you want to keep digging, go ahead, but the problem's fixed. You can test it for yourself. Jason hesitated for a moment before walking back to his terminal. The room held its breath as Jason started typing, running his own diagnostics. It was clear that Jason had expected failure, but as the system refreshed and the error messages disappeared, his expression slowly shifted from skepticism to reluctant admiration. "I'll be damned," Jason muttered under his breath. The system was running again, smoothly, without a hitch. Mia, who had been monitoring the situation from the side, was the first to speak. "It's working! It's actually working!" Noah stood back, watching the data flow once more. The crisis had been averted. The logistics network was up and running again, the backlogs of orders processing smoothly. What had seemed like a looming disaster was now nothing more than a brief moment in time, a challenge that Noah had risen to meet. Claire Dalton, standing silently in the background, stepped forward. Her eyes met Noah's, and in them there was a recognition. "You did it, Noah," she said, her voice calm but filled with genuine appreciation. "You've saved Dalton Tech. We were on the brink of losing millions in revenue, and now, thanks to you, we're back on track." Noah's chest tightened at her words. The magnitude of what he had just done hadn't fully settled in. But it was real. He had stepped into an unfamiliar world and proved himself when the stakes were higher than ever. Jason, though still maintaining his stoic exterior, spoke with grudging respect. "I'll admit, you've got a knack for this." Claire looked over at Jason, sensing the tension that still lingered between him and Noah. She didn't miss the subtle flicker of resentment in Jason's eyes, but she chose to focus on the bigger picture. "Noah," Claire said, her voice steady, "you've more than earned your place here." The room was filled with a quiet sense of relief, but Noah knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to overcome. But for the first time in a long while, he felt the weight of his choices lifting. He had proven to himself and to Dalton Tech that he was more than just an outsider. He was a part of something bigger now. And as the system hummed back to life, Noah realized that this was his moment, his breakthrough. The logistics floor of Dalton Tech was quieter than it had been in hours. The crisis that had once threatened to unravel everything was now behind them, and Noah Evans stood in front of the terminal, his hands still slightly trembling from the intensity of the moment. The system was restored, and with it, Dalton Tech's future. Claire Dalton stood off to the side, her gaze fixed on Noah as the rest of the team dispersed, returning to their tasks with a renewed sense of purpose. She had seen many people come and go throughout her career, but there was something about Noah's calm under pressure that set him apart. He had risen to the occasion when everything seemed lost, and now he had earned his place in the company. She walked over to him, her heels clicking softly against the floor. "Noah," she said, her voice steady, "I think it's time we have a conversation." Noah looked up, meeting her gaze, still processing the whirlwind of events. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew this moment was pivotal. Claire's eyes were filled with a rare sincerity, and for the first time, Noah realized that the job he had been given wasn't just a temporary assignment. He was being offered something much bigger. "I've been watching you, the way you handled the logistics failure, how you kept calm, how you found the solution. There's something about you. You're exactly the kind of leader Dalton Tech needs." Noah felt a lump form in his throat. Was she offering him a role? A permanent one? His mind raced, still overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation. Claire didn't wait for him to speak. "I want to offer you the position of Director of Logistics Operations. You'll be responsible for overseeing our global logistics network, a key component of Dalton Tech's operations. It's yours if you want it." Noah's heart skipped a beat. Director of Logistics Operations. The role was a far cry from where he had started just a few hours ago. An outsider, just trying to survive. But now, he was being handed an opportunity to lead. "I don't know what to say," Noah replied, his voice shaking slightly. "I've never worked in a position like this. I'm not even from this world." "You don't need to be," Claire said, her smile reassuring. "What you've shown today is exactly what Dalton Tech values. You have the skills, the ability to think under pressure, and the integrity to lead." Noah's mind was still spinning. He hadn't come here expecting a career. He had come to fix a problem. But here he was, being handed a life-changing opportunity. "I'll accept," he said finally, his voice filled with a newfound confidence. "I'll do my best." Claire nodded, her approval clear in her eyes. "I believe in you." Later that evening, Noah returned home to Ben, his 8-year-old son, who had been waiting eagerly all day. The moment he walked through the door, Ben ran up to him, his eyes full of excitement. "Dad, did you get the job?" Noah smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "Yeah, Ben, I did, and things are going to get better for us." Ben's face lit up. "Does that mean we can go get the sneakers?" Noah chuckled and nodded. "Yes, Ben, we'll go get them, just you and me." As they drove to the store, Noah's mind settled on the promise he had made, to give Ben a better life. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Noah felt like he was on the right path. The days that followed Noah's promotion were a whirlwind of activity. As Director of Logistics Operations, he dove headfirst into the complex web of Dalton Tech's global network, fixing inefficiencies and streamlining processes. But not everyone in the company welcomed his sudden rise to power with open arms. Jason Mitchell, the head of the technical division, had been stewing since the day Noah had walked in and, against all odds, saved the day. Jason had built his career at Dalton Tech from the ground up, and the idea of an outsider like Noah, with no formal tech background, swooping in and taking on a position of authority was something he couldn't shake off. In the break room, Jason stood with a group of his colleagues, his arms crossed tightly across his chest, his posture rigid. His voice, though low, carried the unmistakable bitterness he had been trying to suppress. "I still don't get it," Jason said, his tone dripping with sarcasm as he sipped his coffee. "I've been running this division for years, and now they've just handed the entire logistics department to some guy who barely knows how our systems work. I mean, who does he think he is?" His colleagues shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. Jason wasn't the type to keep his feelings hidden, especially when it came to matters as personal as this. "I'm telling you," Jason continued, his voice low but filled with resentment, "he's a flash in the pan. It's all well and good until the next crisis hits. Let's see how long he lasts when things get tough." His words hung in the air, laden with the weight of resentment and pride. Jason couldn't fathom how a man who had come from outside the world of billion-dollar tech and high-stakes corporate decisions could so easily be accepted as a leader at Dalton Tech. It aided him, a simmering frustration he hadn't yet been able to process. But what Jason didn't know, or perhaps refused to acknowledge, was that Noah's rise wasn't just a stroke of luck. It wasn't just a result of being in the right place at the right time. Noah had proven his competence and leadership under pressure. He had done what Jason couldn't do, fix the logistical crisis when it mattered most. Meanwhile, Claire Dalton, as always, remained in control of the situation, observing the growing tension without letting it affect her decisions. She had noticed the shift in Jason's demeanor since Noah's promotion. She had seen the looks exchanged in meetings, the dismissive comments behind closed doors. Claire wasn't blind to the undercurrents of dissatisfaction in her team. Jason's ego had been bruised, and he had been holding on to that resentment, letting it affect the way he interacted with Noah. But Claire was a seasoned CEO in the billion-dollar tech world, and she knew how to handle such delicate dynamics. That afternoon, after yet another meeting where Jason had undermined Noah's suggestions, Claire knew it was time to step in. She called both Noah and Jason into her office. The door clicked shut behind them, and the room felt suddenly smaller, more intimate. Claire's presence filled the space, her authority palpable, her eyes sharp with a mixture of concern and resolve. "Jason, Noah," Claire began, her voice calm but firm. "I can feel the tension between the two of you, and frankly, it's affecting the work. Dalton Tech thrives on collaboration, not division. I won't allow personal issues to cloud our judgment."
Jason opened his mouth to protest, but Claire silenced him with a raised hand. "No, I don't want to hear it," Claire said, her tone brokering no argument. "You've both worked hard to get to where you are, but we need to act as a team. I've seen what Noah is capable of. He's earned his place here, and I'm not about to let you undermine his efforts, Jason." Jason's face reddened, but he remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor, unwilling to meet Claire's eyes. The resentment in him was palpable, but he knew better than to challenge Claire when she spoke with that kind of conviction. "Noah," Claire turned to him, her voice softening but still carrying the weight of her words. "I know this isn't easy, but I want you to know I made this decision for a reason. You've shown me and everyone else here that you have the ability to lead. Don't let anyone, no matter who they are, make you doubt that." Noah's expression softened, a mixture of gratitude and self-assurance settling in his chest. For the first time since he had stepped into this high-powered tech world, he realized he truly belonged. Claire believed in him, and that belief was something he could build on. Claire took a step back, her tone shifting to one of finality. "This is a company where we lead with integrity. Respect is not optional, Jason. From now on, I expect both of you to work together, not against each other. Are we clear?" Jason, still reluctant but acknowledging the power dynamics at play, gave a stiff nod. "Understood." Claire turned to Noah, a reassuring smile on her face. "Good. Let's get back to work." As Noah left Claire's office, a new sense of purpose swelled in his chest. He had always been an outsider in a world of high-powered billionaire tech moguls, but now, with Claire's unwavering support, he knew his place here was solidified. The corporate tension between him and Jason would simmer for a while, but Noah was no longer concerned. He was moving forward, unshaken and determined to prove that he had the skills and leadership to take Dalton Tech to new heights. The final confrontation had been a moment of clarity. With Claire's guidance, Noah was finally able to step into the role he had always dreamed of, one where respect was earned, not given, and where he could make an impact that would last. The view from Noah's new office was nothing short of breathtaking. From his high-rise perch in the heart of Silicon Valley, he could see the sprawling cityscape of billion-dollar tech giants, the headquarters of the world's most powerful corporations. A soft glow from the setting sun reflected off the glass buildings, casting long shadows across the streets. It was a city built on ambition, innovation, and an unrelenting desire to succeed. But Noah was no longer just an observer, sitting on the sidelines. He was now a part of this world, a world he had once thought was beyond his reach.
As he stood at the window, his mind drifted back to the beginning, to the days when he was just another struggling father, working multiple jobs to provide for his son, Ben. The long hours, the uncertainty, the endless cycle of hope and disappointment, it all seemed so distant now. Yet each step in that journey had brought him here, to this moment.
Noah's rise had not been easy. He had faced challenges that would have broken many. The failure of his previous career, the constant worry about whether he could make ends meet, and the emotional weight of trying to build a better life for Ben. All of these had shaped him, but what had truly defined him was his integrity, the ability to make the right choices even when the stakes were high, even when it meant sacrificing his own future for someone else. He thought about the moment when he had helped Claire, a stranger, in the middle of a storm. He had been desperate, late for an interview that could have changed his life, yet something within him told him to stop, to help her. That simple act of kindness had set off a chain of events that he could never have imagined. That decision, made with no expectation of anything in return, had led him to this very moment. From a temp worker, barely scraping by, to now being the director of logistics operations at one of the most respected tech companies in the world, Noah had come full circle. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Claire entered, her usual confident stride, filling the room with her commanding presence. "I see you're getting comfortable in here," she said, her voice warm but with an underlying edge of authority that made it clear she was still very much in charge. Noah smiled. "I guess I'm getting used to it." Claire glanced around the room, her eyes lingering on the executive desk and the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. "It suits you," she said, a hint of pride in her voice. "You've earned this, Noah. I knew from the moment I met you that you were someone who would rise to the occasion." Noah looked down at the desk, still in awe of how far he had come. "I never imagined it would happen like this," he said, his voice tinged with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "I thought I was just trying to survive. I never thought I'd be sitting here, making decisions that could change the future of Dalton Tech." Claire nodded, her gaze softening. She said, "That's the thing about life. Sometimes you don't see the big picture until you're in it. But you've shown us all what it means to lead with integrity and resilience."
Noah's eyes met hers, and for the first time, he truly understood what she meant. He wasn't just a man who had stumbled into an opportunity. He was someone who had been given a second chance, and he had made the most of it. The path he had walked, from struggling father to tech executive, was one paved by hard work, sacrifice, and the kind of selflessness that was rare in the world of billion-dollar decisions. As Claire turned to leave, she paused at the door and looked back at him. "The future's in your hands now, Noah, and I believe you're more than ready." Noah watched her walk out, the weight of her words settling on his shoulders. The challenges ahead would be many: logistical problems, high-stakes corporate decisions, and moments of doubt. But now, he knew he had something greater than just a position at Dalton Tech. He had purpose, and he had a team that respected him. He glanced back out the window, the sun now fully set, casting the city in a soft golden light. The road ahead was uncertain, full of obstacles and unknowns, but for the first time, Noah felt ready to face whatever came his way. He had learned that integrity, no matter the cost, always had a way of paying off. And now, as an executive in a world that once felt so distant, Noah was prepared to lead with the same selflessness that had brought him